The trade war between the United States and China is one of the most talked about global economic conflicts in recent years. But what exactly is behind this ongoing dispute between the world's two largest economies? What are the underlying factors driving this trade war? And what does it mean for the global economy? In this video, we'll break down the causes, the consequences, and the future of the U.S.-China trade war. The U.S.-China trade war, which began to escalate in 2018 under the Trump administration, has far-reaching consequences for the global economy. With both countries imposing tariffs on billions of dollars worth of goods, the conflict has affected industries from agriculture to technology, with both sides accusing each other of unfair trade practices. But the trade war is not just about tariffs and trade imbalances. It's also about geopolitics, economic strategies, and the battle for global dominance. To understand the conflict, we need to explore the key factors behind it. The trade deficit, a major source of tension. At the heart of the U.S.-China trade war is the massive trade imbalance between the two countries. The United States has long had a significant trade deficit with China, meaning it imports far more from China than it exports to the country. In 2020, for example, the U.S. trade deficit with China was around $310 billion. U.S. officials, particularly under President Trump, argued that this imbalance was harmful to the U.S. economy, leading to job losses, particularly in manufacturing industries. The Trump administration's strategy was to address this trade deficit by imposing tariffs on Chinese goods, aiming to make Chinese products more expensive and less competitive in the U.S. market. The idea was that this would reduce the demand for Chinese goods and encourage U.S. companies to manufacture more domestically. China, in response, imposed tariffs on U.S. goods, including agricultural products, which hit U.S. farmers hard. However, the trade deficit has not disappeared, and while tariffs have impacted some industries, they have also had negative effects on consumers and businesses in both countries. U.S. consumers have had to pay higher prices for Chinese products, and many U.S. businesses that rely on Chinese imports for their supply chains have faced increased costs. This has led some critics to question whether the tariffs have achieved their intended goals. Intellectual property, theft, and technology transfer. Another major issue in the trade war is China's practices related to intellectual property, IP, and technology transfer. The United States has long accused China of stealing U.S. intellectual property and forcing American companies to transfer their technology to Chinese firms as a condition of doing business in China. Many U.S. companies argue that they are required to share their technology with Chinese partners in exchange for access to the Chinese market. The U.S. government claims that China's policies related to IP theft and forced technology transfer are unfair and violate international trade rules. In 2018, the U.S. Trade Representative USTR launched an investigation into China's practices, which led to the imposition of tariffs on Chinese goods. China, in turn, denied the accusations and argued that the U.S. was using these claims as a pretext to stifle China's rise as a global economic power. The U.S. has also raised concerns about China's Made in China 2025 initiative, which aims to make China a global leader in advanced technologies such as artificial intelligence, robotics, and semiconductor manufacturing. Many in the U.S. believe that China's push to dominate these high-tech sectors could undermine U.S. technological leadership and create an unfair competitive advantage, geopolitical rivalry, and global influence. The U.S.-China trade war is not just about economics, it's also about geopolitics. As China's economic power has grown, so too has its political and military influence on the global stage. The United States, as the world's dominant superpower, views China's rise as a challenge to its own global influence, particularly in Asia. In response, the US has sought to contain China's growing influence by forming strategic alliances with countries in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond. This includes strengthening ties with Japan, Australia, and India, as well as pushing back against China's Belt and Road Initiative, which aims to expand China's economic and geopolitical influence across Asia, Africa, and Europe. The trade war is part of this broader geopolitical struggle. By targeting China's economic power, the U.S. aims to weaken China's ability to challenge American dominance in the global order. At the same time, China views the U.S. trade war as an attempt to stifle its growth and limit its ability to project power globally. Domestic political pressures and nationalism. Domestic politics also play a significant role in the U.S. China trade war. For former President Trump, the trade war was a key part of his America First agenda, which focused on reducing trade deficits, protecting American jobs, and challenging what he saw as unfair trade practices by foreign nations, particularly China. The trade war resonated with many American voters, particularly in manufacturing states, who felt that their jobs had been outsourced to China due to unfair trade policies. Nationalism has been a significant driver of the trade war on both sides. In the U.S., the trade war was portrayed as a way to restore American economic power and hold China accountable for its actions. In China, the trade war has been framed as a fight for national sovereignty and an effort to protect the country's economic interests against foreign interference. Chinese officials have emphasized the importance of self-reliance and reducing dependence on foreign technology and markets, a sentiment that has been echoed in the country's domestic policies. The role of global supply chains and the COVID-19 pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic has added another layer of complexity to the U.S.-China trade war. As the world's manufacturing hub, China has been a central player in global supply chains. However, the pandemic disrupted these supply chains, leading to shortages of key products including electronics, medical supplies, and raw materials. The U.S. government has sought to decouple from China in certain industries, particularly in technology and pharmaceuticals, to reduce its dependence on Chinese manufacturing. This push for supply chain diversification, known as reshoring, has led to calls for moving production away from China and back to the U.S. or to other countries. While reshoring has gained traction, it remains uncertain whether it can fully replace China's role in global supply chains, given the country's size, infrastructure, and cost advantages. Nevertheless, the pandemic has intensified the desire among many countries to reduce their reliance on China, which has fueled tensions in the trade war. The future of the U.S.-China trade war. The U.S.-China trade war is far from over, and its future remains uncertain.